living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check. And since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on.
JD Vance just gave Europe a huge wake-up call. On February 14th at the Munich Security Conference, JD said all the things that needed to be said. He's one of the most inspirational people living, from a small town in Ohio to the Vice President of the United States. These are JD Vance's best moments. Please triple check that you're subscribed. First of all, why are JD Vance's comebacks so good? Could it be because he works for the very best? Listen to what Donald Trump told Caitlin Collins from CNN.
Mr. President, you won the White House in part because of high inflation. If your tariffs make prices go up...
Excuse me, we haven't asked you to speak yet, please. Right?
The two make an incredible pair because their message is always so clear.
And expressing opinions isn't election interference. Even when people express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential. And trust me, I say this with all humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk. But what German democracy, what no democracy, American, German, or European will...
I loved the pause and the little grin at the end. It's just so good. This man gave the politest, most professional and respectful roast to Europe to their faces that I have ever seen.
And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet.
They are done. Everybody who participated in this type of stuff in the US, fired. They're done. No more funding, out of jobs. Maybe some of them will get arrested, and anybody in Europe is also not appearing to be off the hook. His speech, with an emphasis on free speech, was so good that it made European leaders give speeches about how his speech was offensive.
This democracy that was just called into question by the US Vice President, and not just the German democracy, but Europe as a whole. He spoke of the annulment of democracy, and if I understood him correctly, he compares the condition of Europe with the condition that prevails in some authoritarian regimes.
Yeah, you did understand him correctly. And even though all of you guys are clapping now, it'll be interesting to see what the people of Europe think and how this plays out. You have to be so brave to do this. Here he is calling them out to their faces about illegal immigration.
I believe there is nothing more urgent than mass migration. Today, almost 1 in 5 people living in this country moved here from abroad. That is, of course, an all-time high. It's a similar number, by the way, in the United States, also an all-time high. The number of immigrants who entered the EU from non-EU countries doubled between 2021 and 2022 alone, and of course, it's gotten much higher since. And we know this situation, it didn't materialize in a vacuum. It's the result of a series of conscious decisions made by politicians all over the continent and others across the world over the span of a decade.
I thought that he was going to say, and in this audience. It almost felt like he did. Here's a quick example of somebody in Europe sharing their opinion about JD Vance's speech.
It's really quite uplifting to think there is actually somebody somewhere in the world that sees what's actually happening to people in Europe and Great Britain.
So crazy that somebody not even from their country cares more about them and is doing more for them. Even though his opinion may not be the most popular, he still shares it.
What is the first Islamist country that is going to have a nuclear weapon? And I sort of joked, I said, maybe it's going to be the United Kingdom, because they're so bad at assimilating sort of newer immigrants into their society. You have definitely communities in the UK where local leaders are running explicitly on Sharia law and winning elections in cities that are in the United Kingdom, right? This is England. This is like where America came from, right? There's a bunch of English pilgrims who came to the United States.
We live in a world where we are constantly influenced. So it's pretty impressive to see somebody who is able to remain an independent thinker. And I really like the fact that he is also Catholic. So let's go Catholics.
There's this old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country. And then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society. And I think the profound difference that Donald Trump brings to the leadership of this country is the simple concept, America first.
I really appreciated his ability to put this into words. If you ask me what was JD Vance's most viral and memorable moment, I'd have to show you this clip. And maybe it's true that first impressions are lasting impressions, because ever since this, JD Vance has become known as a bit of a savage.
I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted. And because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
Yes, most Americans do agree with you. I actually really like the fact that he was so respectful and addressed her by her name. Here is another savage moment from JD Vance.
How you were prepping for a debate with Tim Walz, who has described himself as a bad debater. Who's helping you, and how are you prepping?
Well, I found a good friend from back home who embellishes and lies a lot, and I'm having him stand in for Tim Walz.
I'm so happy to see that meme coming back as a trend, and it is because of JD Vance. It's not like he just says a bunch of random insults. He actually makes people think about the things that he is saying.
Who would you rather have facing down, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping? Someone who is afraid of interviews with the friendly American media? Or someone who faces down two assassins and returns triumphantly to the very place that he got shot?
Yep. And it's not like he's making up anything. These are facts. If you are not already becoming a huge JD Vance fan, watch how he handles the media.
So this week we learned that China was behind a broad hacking campaign targeting the phones of both presidential campaigns, highlighting the threat that China poses to this country. And yet Donald Trump recently called his domestic political opponents, quote, the enemy from within, and said they are more dangerous than Russia and China. Do you believe that people like Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi are more dangerous than Russia and China?
Well, I think what Donald Trump said is that those folks pose a greater threat to United States' peace and security because America is strong enough to stand up to any foreign adversary.
Do you agree with him? They pose a larger threat to the United States than Russia and China?
What he said, and I do agree with this, what he said is that the biggest threat we have in our country, it's not a foreign adversary because we can handle these guys. We can handle foreign conflicts. We can handle, look, under Nancy Pelosi's long life in public leadership, the United States has gone from the preeminent industrial power of the world to second next to China. That fundamentally belongs on Nancy Pelosi's shoulders. And if we're going to have a more prosperous country, we've got to recognize our own leadership is why we lost our industrial base to China. Our own leadership is failing to lead this country into peace and prosperity. And of course, Kamala Harris, look, when I look at the biggest threats to America, Kristen, I think the fact that people can't afford groceries, the fact that we can't meet our recruitment goals in the military, the fact that Americans have a wide open southern border, that's a way bigger threat than any foreign threat. And yes, it's caused by broken leadership.
Yes. Yes, and I hate, like, it's so crazy that she tried to frame him and try to set him up. Do you agree with that? Are you just as bad as him? And he came back with so many facts. He gave a very logical answer, and something that I like about it is how in tuned and aligned it is with Donald Trump and the mission that he is after. I mean, I don't know if we have ever seen so much unity in a political party before. Do you guys remember when they kept fact-checking Donald Trump during the debates? Well, they had the vice presidential debates afterwards, and JD Vance was not going to stand for the same type of behavior. So this is the most infamous moment from the vice presidential debate.
Governor, and just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years.
Yes.
That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process.
The legal
so
process.
Much to get to, Senator.
So ridiculous.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we want to have.
App has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process.
Thank you for explaining the legal process. I mean, they actually cut his mic off for telling the truth. And the truth is that they were trying to make all of these ways for migrants to come into our country and go through what they were calling the legal process. Are you kidding me? It's not considered a legal process to just come into the US and then get like some type of protection status. We are so proud of how talented the Avengers team is.
Ma'am, I don't need a teleprompter. I've actually got thoughts in my head, unlike Kamala Harris.
Oh, I have never seen anything more savage in my life. JD Vance is so savage that many times he doesn't even have to say a word to get his message across. You know what else is so savage? Going from poverty and having an addicted mother to enlisting in the Marines, going to Ohio State and Yale and becoming a Yale Law grad, becoming a New York Times best-selling author, a tech investor, US Senator, and then the Vice President. That, my friends, is an incredible comeback in of itself. Triple check that you are subscribed. Make sure right now that you have clicked the red button and the bell icon. I'll see you next time. Bye.